If you find yourself paralyzed at forks in life, endlessly weighing possibilities until the moment passes, there is an ancient discipline that reframes decision-making not as addition, but as subtraction. Miyamoto Musashi, the samurai who refined combat into philosophy, taught that clarity arises when we deliberately remove everything that distracts the will, leaving a single, decisive path. This lost principle is not about faster choices or tricks to stop thinking. It is a method of shaping your environment, habits, and identity so that the right decision becomes the obvious one. In the next minutes, you will meet a modern person who collapses under choice and is rebuilt by that same practice of deliberate omission, and you will be offered precise small rules to test for 30 days. Chapter 1. The Moment of Breakage. Aaron was 40, a lawyer whose life had been a ledger of obligations and polite compromises, and one exhausted morning he realized he could not recall why any of it mattered. Decision by committee. His own committee of small fears had hollowed his days into a series of reactive answers that satisfied nobody, least of all himself. He discovered Musashi's writings while searching for a different life, and was struck by a phrase that kept returning: remove until only the necessary remains. That line did not feel like a strategy at first. It felt like a verdict. He left for a week with one suitcase and no plan except to test the notion of subtraction. Chapter 2. The First Principle, Cut to Declare. Musashi's lost edge begins with a simple act: state what you will eliminate before you decide what to do. Aaron's first cut was small and severe. He decided to eliminate multitasking from his workday entirely for 30 days. No split screen, no messaging during focused time, no quick email checks. The rule created a binary choice each time attention tempted him. Keep the rule or break it, with no bargaining permitted. This simple subtraction immediately reoriented his experience of time and reduced the mental friction of choosing what to do next. Chapter 3. The Discipline of Non-Negotiables. The samurai lived by fixed, small acts that became identity markers. Aaron adopted 3 strict non-negotiables: a single 2-hour deep work block each morning, 1 deliberate conversation daily without devices, and an evening ritual of 10 minutes reflecting on choices made. These acts were not ambitious goals, but anchors that shaped the edges of his day. The power was not in their difficulty, but in their non-negotiable nature. Once they were removed from choice, everything else fell into clearer perspective. Repetition turned these practices into identity signals rather than obligations, and identity resisted erosion where willpower often fails. Chapter 4. The Sharpness of Absence. Absence is an active force, not a passive void. Musashi sharpened the mind by sparing it from needless motion. As Aaron removed options, he felt a peculiar emptiness that initially provoked anxiety. A mind conditioned to constant decision recoiled at fewer inputs. Over time, that absence functioned like a lens, concentrating attention and making the essential appear with uncanny clarity. He learned to welcome the void as a revealing space where true priorities surfaced, rather than as something to be hastily filled with busyness. Chapter 5. Presence as Calibration. The samurai trained presence as a technical skill, a way to test reality in the moment rather than live in rehearsed fear. Aaron practiced micro-presence exercises, naming 3 sensations before answering a message, noticing breath at the start of each decision, and pausing 5 seconds after an emotional surge. These small calibrations were not spiritual cliches, but tactical resets that prevented reflexive choices. Presence shortened deliberation by anchoring decisions in current facts, reducing the influence of imagined futures that previously dominated his thinking. Chapter 6. Systems of Elimination. Musashi favored systems over inspiration. Aaron designed elimination systems to make good choices natural. He created thresholds. If a meeting could be handled in a 2-line email, it was not scheduled. If a task could be outsourced for less than the cost of his distraction, it was delegated. If a commitment did not align with his 3 non-negotiables, it was declined. These systems acted like engineered declines, preempting indecision by removing marginal options ahead of time. Over weeks, the context around him changed so that the path of least resistance was also the path of his chosen focus. Chapter 7. Identity before outcome. The lost principle insists that who you are must guide what you choose, not the other way around. Aaron stopped framing decisions as experiments to chase results and began enacting the behaviors of the man he intended to be: calm, decisive, and present. He spoke less of trying and more of being, which simplified choices into identity tests rather than performance metrics. This subtle shift removed the emotional stakes from each decision, because choices now served to confirm identity, not to prove worth. Chapter 8. The Economy of Silence. Musashi sought silence not to escape thought but to see its structure. Aaron instituted daily silences to map recurring mental patterns. He journaled in disciplined bullets each night, not to purge, but to catalog repetitive anxieties and see which decisions kept reappearing. The practice made his mental geometry visible and negotiable. Once named, a fear became an object to be trimmed rather than an endless story to be lived. Silence thus operated as diagnostic space, revealing where further subtraction would be most effective. Chapter 9. Surrendering Outcomes. Paradoxically, deliberate subtraction requires a form of surrender, not giving up, but relinquishing the illusion of control over every result. Aaron learned to accept that removing options might cause temporary loss, and that loss was the tax for clearer judgment. He let go of small projects he had been nurturing out of habit and resisted the urge to micromanage every consequence. This surrender conserved his attention and allowed him to concentrate force where it mattered most, turning restraint into a strategic asset. Chapter 10. The Mirror of Adversity. Musashi used challenge as a teacher. Aaron deliberately sought friction to test his new structure. He accepted a demanding pro bono case and a cold morning run in winter to expose where his discipline broke down. Each difficulty reflected a precise flaw, a threshold too low, a ritual that needed tightening, a temptation that required greater friction. Rather than interpreting hardship as failure, he used it as data to refine his system of subtraction. Over time, adversity became an instrument for iteration rather than a cause for panic. Chapter 11. Speech, Restraint, and Relationship. The samurai treated speech as controlled action. Aaron practiced restraint in conversation, making commitments briefly and with care. He replaced reflexive explanations with concise statements and learned to listen with the intent to understand rather than reply. This restraint simplified social decisions and revealed who truly required his time and who simply wanted noise. Relationships became a series of intentional engagements, and the fewer interactions he engaged in, the deeper and clearer those he kept became. Chapter 12. Compounding Simplicity. The principle of subtraction compounds. Each removal magnifies the clarity of what remains. As Aaron continued small, repeatable subtractions, decisions grew fewer and less fraught. What once required long deliberation became obvious through the architecture he had built. The work was never finished, but the cost of indecision steadily declined. The lost Musashi principle had not sped him up through force. It had reconfigured his life so that decisive action flowed from form and absence rather than from frantic accumulation. Conclusion: the single rule to try. Practice one strict subtraction for 30 days and honor it as a test of identity. Choose one habitual class of decision to remove and do not negotiate. Treat this removal as a scaffold on which to build presence, ritual, and systems that reinforce the choice. Musashi's lesson is austere and precise. Sharpen your life by eliminating what blunts your will, and let the remaining form reveal the decision that was always right. The work is quiet and slow, but through disciplined absence, your choices will become fewer, clearer, and far less costly.